Hello, welcome back to the channel. My name is Jack the Jobber. Going to continue that Modern Classic series I started, looking at Roman Reigns versus CM Punk from this year's WrestleMania in the main event of Night 2. But now I'm going to take a look at a match that I personally believe is an absolute tag team classic. And just before I dive in, if you enjoy the channel, then please do drop a like on the video. It massively helps out, boosting the algorithm, I don't really understand it. If you ask quite a lot of wrestling fans what the best tag team match of the modern age is, there'll be, I think, a fairly limited number of candidates. Hangman and Omega versus the Bucks in AEW, maybe one of the matches in the FTR Briscoes feud in Ring of Honor, and of course this match, the earlier version of FTR, The Revival, taking on DIY, the team of Johnny Gargano and Tommaso Ciampa. And I think that one's my pick. The one at NXT TakeOver Toronto, 2 out of 3 falls. I think if you asked me what my favourite modern tag team match is, that's the first one that springs to mind. In fact, if you asked what my favourite tag team match ever was, in all of wrestling history, this again would probably be the first one to spring to mind. I don't know if that necessarily means it's true, and I actually do think it's the best tag team match in the history of wrestling, but there must be a reason that it's the first one to spring to mind at least. So let's really break down all the different ingredients that make it so good. A perfect blend, in my opinion, of old and new school tag team wrestling. It's a masterpiece in so many different ways for so many different reasons. It's a masterpiece in terms of match construction, pacing, storytelling through action, and many more. And by the way, I know that the two members of the Revival were called Scott Dawson and Dash Wilder back then. I'm going to probably just call them Dax Harwood and Cash Wheeler, the names they go by now, because I think I'm just going to keep tripping over my words, and this video would take a long time to edit. I think I'd make that mistake on like every take. Now, when people talk about DIY versus the Revival in Toronto, they usually concentrate mainly on the match itself, which is completely understandable because it's so good, as we'll see. But the build has slightly been lost to time, I think. So let's fix that. Now, before the Toronto match, a lot of people will probably already know that the Revival had beaten DIY in their previous big TakeOver match at TakeOver Brooklyn 2, meaning that the Revival retained the tag team titles at that point. But there's a little bit more to it than that. The rivalry between these two teams goes a little bit deeper. In fact, the teams first clashed when Gargano and Ciampa were still quite new on the scene in NXT on a weekly episode in June 2016. That's quite a way before this Toronto pay-per-view, which took place later on in the autumn, in the fall. Now, it is true that Gargano and Ciampa weren't as new to NXT as it would make it seem. They had appeared in 2015, for example, as part of the Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic. However, they only signed full-time in early 2016. And this relative inexperience is very important to the story, with Gargano and Ciampa portrayed as a pretty new team, but one with an amazing amount of potential, who could possibly just run through the NXT Tag Team division and win those belts. But in this first clash between the two teams in June 2016 on just a weekly NXT, DIY catch the Revival very much heading in the opposite direction, in free fall seemingly, having lost their tag team gold to American Alpha and possibly having lost their confidence? We'll have to see. And it appears so, because in what is presented as a pretty shock result, DIY actually pick up the win, catching the heels off guard with a flash pinfall, and the Revival absolutely cannot believe this. They can't stand it because they're so arrogant that in their minds they're the best tag team in the world. How can this, again, relatively new team have upset them in such a way? So they beat the face team down after the bell, but are chased away by American Alpha, but then the Revival go on to beat American Alpha at the next TakeOver event, winning back their cherished tag team titles. This slide has been addressed, and they're back on top again. What will DIY do about this? Because having already scored a pinfall victory over the two-time tag team champions, it's inevitable that DIY are going to get a title shot, and so we get to TakeOver Brooklyn 2. And this match is excellent too, by the way. It may have since been overshadowed by its Toronto sequel, but I think that the first TakeOver match between the Revival and DIY still deserves a lot of love as well. The crowd in that Brooklyn match are electric, and they bite hard on several very well-constructed near falls down the stretch. The finish is brilliant as well, as the challengers hit Cash with their meet-in-the-middle double-team finisher and seemingly get the 3 count, only for the ref to actually realise after he's counted 3 that Cash's leg was on the ropes. Dak had sneakily put the leg there from the outside of the ring just before the pinfall was complete. So the ref goes 1, 2, 3, wait, no. And it's like a heartbreaking moment. The crowd think that they've had this huge title change before them, and then it's so cruelly taken away. Not just from the crowd, of course, but from the baby faces as well. From there, though, the match is still going on. DIY try to regroup, but the heels take out Ciampa on the floor, isolating Johnny and ruthlessly targeting his leg, forcing a heartbreaking submission. So it might not be a big jubilant ending to the match, but the message is very clear and very, very dramatic. These champions who talk themselves up as the greatest around, they have just barely squeaked out of New York with their title reign intact. Wow. Remember when Triple H could book like this? He probably still can. Just try doing this sort of stuff again, Paul. Now it's Dusty Classic time, the 2016 version of the tag team tournament, and both teams enter this tournament and face each other in the second round. But before the match can begin, the heels have some disappointing news. Dax has sustained an injury and they've been forced to pull out of the tournament, gifting DIY a bye to the next round. And even though the Revival don't turn face with this announcement or anything, they're still very arrogant about it, they're still very mean, but it is disappointing news for them, isn't it? I mean, this was going to be a great match in a tag team tournament that the Revival would surely want to win, not just for the prestige of winning a tournament, but because it's the Dusty Rhodes Classic. It's a Southern wrestling legend. It's a tournament in his honor. And not just that, but I believe Dusty Rhodes was the first person to put Dax and Cash together during his time in charge of WWE's developmental system. So it's a tournament that they would be heartbroken to pull out of. Anyway, back to DIY, who are still very much in the tournament at this stage, advancing to the next round to take on this terrifying, gigantic new team on the scene, the Authors of Pain. But you'd probably still expect DIY to win this match though, despite the size difference, because booking convention would dictate surely that DIY win the Dusty Classic while the Revival have time to recover, and then they can defend those belts against the winners of the tournament, and it all just makes logical sense. Nope, they lose the match to the Authors of Pain due to interference from the Revival. And Dax's leg is absolutely fine. So why did the Revival lie about this injury? I don't think it's ever explicitly made clear in storyline, which I think is a pretty cool choice because it just leaves us with this nagging feeling, this strong implication that the Revival faked this injury and pulled out of the tournament because they don't want to lose to DIY again. They're scared that they'll be shown up and embarrassed because deep, deep down, maybe they're not as good as DIY. A great part of old school heel work is cowardice. It's great being all dominant and cocky when you're in control of the situation, but a great heel knows that when the chips are down, sometimes the best thing to do is have no shame at all. And that applies even more here, because the Revival didn't just avoid a rematch with DIY, they ruined their own chances of winning the Dusty Classic in order to avoid this rematch. The fabric of what makes the Revival is exposed as a lie. They are the ultimate hypocrites. They don't care about the legacy of Dusty Rhodes. They don't care about the sanctity of old school Southern wrestling, even though they would claim to. All they care about is looking like the best and keeping a hold of those tag belts. NXT General Manager William Regal retaliates by booking a rematch between the two teams at TakeOver Toronto. And this one has a stipulation attached, 2 out of 3 falls. It's a classic old school wrestling stipulation, and one which on the surface seems to favour the heel champions, the more experienced of the two teams and the more old school in their style as well. But I think there's another reason for this stipulation. Remember, of course, that the Revival are probably a bit scared of DIY. And they don't want to face them again. They've tried to weasel out of this until Regal forced their hand. So maybe this stipulation doesn't favour the heels. Maybe this stipulation is really just there to prove who is the better team once and for all. Especially when we look back at the finishing stretch of the first TakeOver match in Brooklyn, where the Revival could be regarded as lucky. Well, with 2 out of 3 falls in place, that should be less of a factor now. So we get to Toronto. Just a quick mention on how perfectly I think these two teams are set up for the classic tag team format. American-style tag team wrestling has for decades been built around a classic formula, the face in peril and the hot tag. So what sort of ingredients do you need for that foundation to be as strong as possible? Well, first of all, you need a really good heel tag team, and you need a heel tag team that can be 2 things, strategic and dirty. Ugh! And the Revival fit that mold perfectly. They are self-consciously styled after classic old-school heel tag teams like the Midnight Express or the Brainbusters. They use all these classic tactics to isolate one of their opponents, cutting the ring in half, utilizing quick tags, and so on and so on. They're also wonderful when it comes to being dirty and breaking the rules. Now, it's one thing to be a heel tag team that cheats. That's like a given. But I think it must be so difficult to be a heel tag team that cheats as well as Dax and Cash do. They are masters at work. And they're so good at it because they vary the way in which they cheat. They don't just rely on the same tricks in every single match again and again. They build upon things they've previously done. We'll see a couple of examples of that in this video. Also, and this might sound quite counterintuitive, but another reason they're so good at breaking the rules is because they make it very obvious. Yeah, they make it obvious how sneaky they're being. Think about how weird that is as a paradox, but it's a balance that is absolutely essential when it comes to being a great heel tag team. Because you've got to be sneaky in kayfabe, but you have to be obvious out of kayfabe, showing the crowd just how devious you're being. Look at us getting away with it, while at the same time getting away with it and being sneaky enough to plausibly fool a referee if this were all real. That's quite a difficult thing to achieve without one side of that equation outweighing the other. You've got to keep it all balanced. And the Revival, they nail this trick every time. Another ingredient you need for this classic old school tag team foundation is a Ricky Morton on the babyface team. A face in peril, somebody who can ramp up the tension with a sense of desperation and an ability to gain sympathy from the crowd. I think Johnny Gargano is a great fit for this role. He's relatively small for a wrestler, he's a great bumper and seller, he's got amazing facial expressions, and he does have, or certainly at this point in his career, he had kind of an innate connection with the NXT audience. And the final piece of the puzzle, the hot tag. You need a great hot tag. And this is where Tommaso Ciampa is so crucial, and this is why DIY are such a great babyface tag team, because while Johnny Gargano is really, really good at getting beaten up, Tommaso Ciampa is really good at getting revenge. When the time comes for that hot tag, you can absolutely rely on Tommaso Ciampa to dish out some vengeance with those knees and those stiff slaps and everything. His offense is very nicely tailored for a hot tag situation. But more importantly than that, I think he's got the right attitude for it. To put it more simply, he's the scary one. It's no surprise that when DIY eventually came to an end, it was indeed Ciampa who betrayed Gargano. Johnny's good at playing a different type of heel, but Ciampa was the right type of pick for this sort of heel turn. But that's a different story for another time. Actually, quite interestingly, in the TakeOver Brooklyn match, they actually did things the other way around, with Ciampa in trouble early on, being the face in peril, and Gargano being the one to make the hot tag. It works that way around as well, and I guess the Brooklyn match is proof of that. But in Toronto, they do things the more natural way around, in my opinion, and I think that's the far more optimal setup. Okay, here we go then, Toronto. 2 out of 3 falls for the NXT Tag Team titles, DIY versus the Revival. Let's try and break down what makes the action so good, because I've explained now all the reasons it had every chance of being great, but of course you still have to deliver in the match itself. It's wrestling. First thing I noticed when watching this match back for this video was the sense of occasion, the atmosphere. It's absolutely crazy, and I think leads to a very specific type of hype for this particular bout. And a very specific type of challenge that must be so hard to overcome. Because on one hand, yes, it must be a great feeling as a wrestler to go into a match that's had a great build and the crowd are really hyped for it. That must be a great feeling. But this particular type of hype, I think arguably makes their job a little bit harder. Because people aren't just expecting this to be a good match. People aren't just looking forward to it. People are expecting this to be a really, really good match. They're not just looking forward to it because the build's been so good and everything. No, the Brooklyn match was so good. That sort of benefited from that boost. But now the bar's already been set. It's already very, very high. And I think that would be really daunting as one of the 4 men going into this match. They reach that high bar, don't worry. Well, they leap over it, which I think makes this match even more impressive, because it wasn't just out of nowhere, what a lovely treat for the fans. No, people were expecting this to be great. People would have bought tickets, maybe on the strength of this match in particular. Also, a nice touch to mention, as this is of course taking place in Canada, the Revival wear pink and black Hart Foundation inspired ring attire. They're big wrestling nerds, of course. Also, DIY are wearing black, red and white attire, which Shawn Michaels often wore. I may be clutching at straws with that one. But maybe not. I don't know. It's wrestling, so who knows? It could have been a deliberate reference. The first fall begins, and importantly, we don't just jump into the face in peril kind of stuff straight away. Not quite. The faces are full of fire and energy, and they build up a real head of steam early on, which is a classic wrestling dynamic. In a wrestling match, when the babyface takes control early on, often the point they want to try and get across is that if this was a fair fight, which it almost never is in wrestling, but if this was a fair fight, then the babyface would win, because they're brave and strong, and that should make us want to cheer them. And it also should make us want to boo the heels when they start to cheat to retake some kind of advantage. And so, Gargano runs wild on both opponents early on, and the crowd are fully with him. He ends up on the ring apron and tries to do his signature spear through the ropes, but Dax stops his momentum, and Cash is instantly in position for a shockingly early shatter machine, 1, 2, 3, and the first fall is over already, quicker than anybody would have imagined. I think this is a great way of constructing this match, giving DIY a mountain to climb and also putting a bit of fear in the fans' minds. All the way through their run on top in NXT, the Revival have always claimed that they are the best tag team in the world and not a single other tag team is on their level. And in winning this first fall so quickly and with such apparent ease, you get this sense of like, oh no, they maybe are actually right. In so quickly and unexpectedly reversing Gargano's momentum and nailing their finisher out of nowhere, the gulf in experience between the two teams is really emphasized. They have been caught out by this well-oiled machine. In real life, the story's a little bit different. Yes, the Revival may be more experienced and successful than DIY at this stage in 2016, but they themselves had only been tagging for about 2 years, I think, at this point, which is crazy given how seamless and enjoyable their work already is. The second fall begins, and look how eager Cash is to restart things quickly and get this over with. But Gargano almost evens the score with a desperate roll-up out of nowhere. It only gets 2, but it's a great little near fall, which would have totally flipped the dynamic of this match. Excuse me. Stumbling over my words. I'm just so excited. Instead, the Revival press their advantage. They take control of the match, and only now, only after the first fall has already happened, do we get what we expected all along. Old school, tactical, dirty, southern tag team wrestling. We get a referee distraction, allowing Cash to land a cheap shot as the illegal man. We get some quick tags and isolating Johnny in the heel corner of the ring. And we also get instances of what some people like to call the Ricky Steamboat rule. If you've never heard of it before, basically the Steamboat rule is that Ricky Steamboat, one of the great all-time pure babyfaces of all time, would often fight back when in trouble in the heat segment of a match. Like, he would only ever take a certain number of moves in a row, and then he would fire back with like a chop or something, and then get beaten down some more again, but there'd always be a sense of resilience and struggle. The logic behind it being that the fans are more likely to cheer for a babyface with a bit of grit and a bit of resilience and determination to win, rather than one who's just kind of taking all these moves and doesn't seem to have a chance in hell. And this is all quite basic stuff, the old school heel tag team stuff, Gargano following the Steamboat rule, but everything feels heightened because of the unique context of this part of the match, it being the second fall, but the first fall having already been lost. So everything's a little bit more desperate. Everybody's a little bit more desperate than usual for that hot tag to happen. Otherwise, the Revival could win at any moment. So of course, they don't give us that hot tag. They make us wait. Johnny uses his agility and quickness to finally get some breathing room and make that hot tag to Ciampa, but just when he's about to do so, and just as the crowd are rising up in anticipation for the hot tag, Cash crawls under the ring to blindside Ciampa and drag him off the apron at the last second. Great, great stuff. They actually did this trick in Brooklyn as well, but without the visual added element of Cash physically crawling under the ring in order to cut off the tag. So this time it's a nice kind of escalation of a trick we'd otherwise have already seen before. It's another example, I think, of the Revival always taking care to just keep things fresh. And it doesn't have to be a grand change to a spot or anything, but just something distinct that helps it stand out from previous examples. And Cash going under the ring here is a perfect example of that. And if you want it explained in kayfabe terms, I suppose you could say that maybe the Revival were worried that Ciampa would be wise to this sort of thing because it had already happened in the previous match. So rather than give him a chance to see Cash coming out of the corner of his eye, Cash just goes under the ring to catch him by like extra surprise. But DIY do seem a bit more prepared though, as Ciampa fights Cash off and the announce team hammer this home. They're like, well, they've fallen victim to this before, but maybe this time DIY have done their homework a little bit. Gargano does make the tag now, but Cash has distracted the referee. So once again, the Revival are just that extra step ahead. And look at the heels gleefully beating Gargano down as the ref admonishes Ciampa for, in his mind, trying to enter the match without being tagged in. The crowd are audibly livid at this point. It is perfectly manufactured injustice. The heels even hit a heart attack at this point to really drive the Hart Foundation tribute home. But just as things are reaching a tipping point and the babyfaces look like they may lose at any moment once again, Gargano finally elbows his way free of Dax, makes the hot tag to Ciampa, and now Ciampa runs wild. Ciampa hits a load of his signature offense and the big running knee, but it's only a very near fall. The fact that this is only one half of the face's meet in the middle double team finisher is very important here because he couldn't quite get the job done, which means Ciampa needs Johnny to be back in this match, but Johnny's taken so much punishment already. And it also means that the Revival's tactics have paid dividends. They've engineered this 2-on-1 beatdown, they've isolated Gargano for large portions of this match, and we get a visual cue to really hammer this point home as well, with Ciampa urging Johnny to get back up on the apron so he can help him, and Johnny really struggling to do so. But struggle back to the apron he does. Brave Gargano, what a babyface. So the heels grab him and try to hit another classic old school tag team finisher, a spike pile driver, but Ciampa saves the day, and moments later he clocks Cash with another huge knee. Cash sells this knee really, really well. He's like a boxer trying not to go down, like he's wobbling all over the place. He even has to grab the ref for support at one point, which is ironic, because this, with the ref taking his eyes off the action, this buys Gargano more time in the match despite being the illegal man. And therefore, the faces can take all the time they need, while the ref's distracted, to set up for the full version of meet in the middle on Dax. That's enough for Ciampa to finally pin Dax, and the match is leveled up at 1 fall apiece. It's also a nice bit of narrative karma as well, with the Revival's usual manipulation of the referee kind of backfiring on them in this instance. It also introduces a theme that becomes more and more obvious and more important as the match goes on, which is the theme that maybe this time, on this very night in Toronto, maybe this time everybody in attendance is witnessing the occasion when the Revival's luck has finally run out. Other things go against them from this point on, and it's very exciting. The final fall begins with the momentum now all in the babyface's favour, and now they demonstrate some nice tag team synergy of their own, with Gargano getting a near fall after a very nicely timed blind tag to catch their opponents off guard and a big slingshot DDT. Now at this point, watching the match back for this video, I was really struck by how hard the crowd bit on this near fall, despite it not really feeling like the sort of thing that would typically signify the end of a match. But I think the crowd biting on it so hard is a real sign that all this groundwork is now starting to pay off, both in the build and the match itself so far. They have the fans absolutely begging for a title change. Gargano really knows how to milk this moment as well with his facial expressions, first desperation and then determination to really finish the job. He tries to press the advantage, but then Cash saves Dax from a roll-up, then tags in and helps Dax hit a huge European uppercut German suplex combination. I realise at this point that for most of the video, I've really concentrated on like the booking and the ring psychology and the storytelling within the match itself, more than the execution of certain moves. It almost goes without saying that the 4 men involved are really good at like the work rate stuff. It all looks crisp, it all looks convincing, it all looks really good. I don't know what you want me to... I can't add anything in that regard. But that double team move, that European uppercut German suplex combination is particularly crisp. Like I saw it, I was like, ooh, delectable. Weird. It's also another very convincing near fall, and this time Ciampa's timing to dive into the ring and break it up is absolutely perfect. And Dax really helps this moment as well with some classic heelish stooging as the illegal man, turning away to celebrate this win that never actually comes. I mean, that's a classic heelish antic, isn't it? Turning to gloat at the crowd, turning away from the pinfall, and then, oh, I can't believe it. It's like, it's the sort of thing you'd see in like the 70s or 80s, and it still works. There's a reason it's never fallen out of style. After this little explosion of action and this big near fall, all 4 men are down exhausted on the canvas, which this little pause gives the crowd a chance to really show their appreciation. It's something that we are very much used to seeing now in big matches, and I understand them wanting to milk the crowd reaction. I get it. I do think it happens maybe a little bit too much these days, although I don't mind it whenever it feels truly earned, but sometimes I just don't know how earned it feels. I mean, here it feels really earned, of course. I'm expecting them all to stay down for ages and ages. And I'm shocked that it only really lasts a few seconds, and then they're back to it straight away again. They are absolutely committed to this frantic pace that they've kept up so far, which is seriously impressive in what I believe is a 20-plus minute match. The champions try to finish Johnny off now once and for all, but he counters a backslide attempt by kicking Cash off the apron. Another Bret Hart reference perhaps. It's slightly reminiscent of the way he beat Roddy Piper at WrestleMania 8, for example. Whether or not that was deliberate, it's still a nice visual counterpoint to Cash saving Dax from a roll-up a few spots earlier, but now Gargano is using the body of the illegal man to help engineer a counter of his own. It's like how a referee distraction helped the Revival earlier on, but then another referee distraction when Cash had grabbed onto him after eating that big knee, that helped DIY win the second fall. So these things sometimes go in pairs, I suppose, where at one stage we had Cash saving Dax as the illegal man. Now Gargano is using Cash as the illegal man to gain an advantage of his own. And we get the biggest example of such a pairing in a little while. So Johnny kicks Cash off the apron and grabs a small package on Dax, which gets another agonizing near fall. And I love this part of the match coming up. I love this little detail, right? It's such a tiny part, but Cash on the outside asking for some sort of confirmation that it was only a 2 count, because of course he'd been kicked off the apron. So he didn't actually see what happened. It's just a tiny little thing, but it's such a good commitment to kayfabe. And it's not just the big fireworks in a match that make it a classic sometimes. It's all the little things, we've heard it before. But when you see it in action and it all knits together, it's part of what makes wrestling so magic. Having just almost seen his tag partner lose the match, Cash decides, right, now it's time to cheat, no more messing around. He grabs one of the tag title belts and slides it into the ring, but then Ciampa takes Cash and himself both over to the outside, and when the ref is busy telling them off, of course his back is turned and Dax picks up the foreign object. Now, not to sound too hyperbolic, but I think the following moment is part of the reason why FTR or the Revival are maybe my favourite tag team ever. Is that sacrilegious? I think they are. And the reason I think that is because they are such effective practitioners of the old school tag team formula. But they also find new little innovative ways to put just a little fresh new spin on a trick we may have seen so many times before. So at this stage, 9 times out of 10, we just see the heel clock the babyface with the belt while the referee's back is turned and throw it out of the ring before the ref turns back around. But here, Dax uses the belt to block a kick from Johnny and injure his leg. And it just stands out so much more. And also, it serves a dual purpose, because not only does it stand out by its own merit, but it also feeds perfectly into the story here, because if we think back to the finish of that Brooklyn match, that of course ended with the Revival ruthlessly targeting Gargano's leg and forcing him to tap out, and now the faces are in exactly the same situation they were in last time, and it feels like this could be the end for DIY. So now we get the callback, and we get the closing stretch of this match on the whole, but it begins with this callback, with Dax locking in exactly the same submission that won the match the first time around, but this time Johnny is more determined, and he slowly and painfully, as a motorbike whizzes past outside almost distracting me, Johnny slowly and painfully claws his way to the bottom rope, and as Dax shouts, "No! No!" and Johnny trembles and gets closer and closer, when he grabs that bottom rope, the crowd explode. And wrestling is so stupid, because in real life what these two guys have done, right, is lie there in the ring and one of them slowly crawled and then grabbed a rope. Right? That's what's happened in reality. But with all the narrative excellence around it and all the build so far and all the great work in this match and in the Brooklyn one as well, just two men lying down and one of them going, eh, and the other one going, oh no, makes a room full of people explode with joy. And I think it's particularly effective because of the callback. Like the pop for this rope break was as if a pinfall had happened to end the match. That's how well they carried this off. But despite the rope break, it's important to remember that the heels are still in control. Ciampa is still down on the outside, Cash has made his way back to the apron, and Gargano is still isolated 2-on-1. And now we get another one of those little details, one of those little things that make a great match so great alongside all the big stuff. Cash calls for the tag from Dax because Cash has had a devious idea, you see. He wants the Revival to steal DIY's finisher, and he wants himself and Dax to hit the meet in the middle. And I think most teams here would just kind of seamlessly move into this spot, especially in like the high-paced modern world and everything. But because the Revival care about kayfabe, and because this is all real, damn it, you actually see Cash explain verbally his plan that he's just come up with to Dax. And you see Dax actually register it, and you see his little smirk as he realizes what his partner wants him to do. Again, it's such a little detail, but it's so much more effective than if they just ran to opposite corners and like telepathically knew what they were going to do. Because this isn't meant to have been planned beforehand. And they communicate that so effectively. And it also communicates to us that the Revival are dicks, because it's such a crucial point of the match. They want to really rub it in their opponent's faces. We're going to steal your move. And that makes it so much more effective when it backfires in their faces. Johnny moves and Cash accidentally kicks his partner, and Ciampa re-emerges to help Johnny hit the Shatter Machine out of nowhere. Remember what I said just before about some of these spots kind of coming in pairs, where one is a visual reminder of another that's just happened. This is such a powerful example of that. The stolen finisher with the slow, unbearable build-up to the heels doing this disrespectful thing. And then the delightful and fast-paced reversal of fortunes with Ciampa getting back in the ring, and suddenly it's a Shatter Machine out of nowhere, and the crowd obviously jump out of their seats for this moment. It's such a great finish to the match. Except it isn't the finish because of Johnny's damaged leg. They've not forgotten about that. They've still taken that into account. This delays his pinfall attempt very slightly, giving Dax just enough time to recover and break up the pinfall attempt, having to jump over the ref in order to do so. At this stage, look at these guys in the front row. This is exactly the reaction the wrestlers would have wanted when putting this match together. After a moment to recover and to let the crowd recover as well, Dax plays possum and rolls Gargano up with a handful of tights, but the trick doesn't work this time. And we get a rare instance in wrestling of the referee actually catching the heel in the act. Whereas in Brooklyn, the ref counted 3, seemingly giving the win to DIY, only to then nullify his decision and break everybody's hearts. Here, the Revival have been caught out by the referee, and again it's a return of this motif that maybe in this match, in this instance, maybe their luck is finally running out and they're going to get their comeuppance. More callbacks to Brooklyn now as they run through basically the same finishing stretch of that match, with Ciampa being thrown into the ring post on the outside, which happened in New York too, and then Gargano's leg being ruthlessly taken out with a chop block. But this time Gargano avoids the follow-up submission, instead managing to stay alive, and there's a bit of a roll-up exchange, and then Gargano locks in the Gargano escape, his finisher, his submission finisher. Seems like the heels are in trouble, but there's 2 of them, and we've seen pinfalls and stuff broken up earlier in this match anyway, so just because this submission's locked in doesn't necessarily mean that it's real trouble for the heels. But then we get the thing that I think this match is most famously remembered for, its finish. And it's no surprise that it's most remembered for this, because it's so visually striking. So as I'm certain many of you will already have seen, Dax gets in to break up the hold, but Ciampa is there just in time to intercept him and locks in a simultaneous submission of his own. And now, for all their strategy and their trickery and their dropping out of the Dusty Rhodes Classic in the past and all their disrespect and all their Weasley-ness, now these arrogant heels are stuck in the middle of the ring with nowhere to go. Dax tries to grab Cash's hand to prevent him from tapping out, but of course, heels are heels, and when the chips are down, they just don't have the heart of a good babyface. Cash taps out, actually they both tap out to really drive the point home, I suppose, and DIY have won the 2 out of 3 falls match. They are the new NXT Tag Team Champions. The lads celebrate with their people, and they truly, truly deserve it. And hey, it's not all bad for the losing team, because Dax got a lovely tweet from the Hitman afterwards to commemorate what a great match it was. How lovely for him. This is an unbelievable wrestling match. It's an unbelievable modern wrestling match for one. It's wrestled at a frightening pace at times despite its length. It's very complicated and intricate with its sequences. The moves are spectacular. Everything's executed very solidly, and all 4 of the wrestlers turn in a brilliant performance. But if you strip all of that away, it is just that classic tag team formula. What I'm saying is, I don't think the real brilliance of DIY versus the Revival in Toronto is the 21st century bells and whistles that have just kind of been piled mindlessly on top of this formula. I think the key ingredient is the respect they pay to that formula, because nothing has just been piled mindlessly on top. They've added new and exciting things that a modern wrestling fan may be more attuned to, but they've done so in a clever and patient way. Nothing is done, nothing is added to this match to detract from that classic tag team formula. Everything added to the match is done to enhance that formula instead. Oh man, what a match. I love that one. I love that match so much. And I hope that you've enjoyed this breakdown as well. I believe TakeOver Toronto's on YouTube in full at the moment, so you can probably just go and find it. And if you've never watched it before, you are in for such a treat. Thank you very much for watching this video. I've been Jack the Jobber. This has been Modern Classic. Give the video a like and a share and a subscribe and all that sort of stuff. And I'll see you next time. Thanks very much for watching and take care.